These men and women are the backbone of our evolving foreign policy. From civil wars to sectarian violence. From trade conflicts to economies looking inwards. They tackle emerging global issues and shape and redefine foreign policy. What does it mean to be a diplomat? What makes a diplomat? We talk to the men and women who are on the hot seat.
Welcome to the Diplomacy Show, where we look at the context behind the text, the meaning behind special events and gestures, the historical and geopolitical compulsions behind foreign policy decisions. Our focus today is on Greece. Greek philosophers, Socrates, Aristotle, have been among the pioneers of Western philosophical thought. The Greek word demos, meaning the people, is the origin of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, being called a democracy.
In elections to the Greek parliament on 7 July, a centre-right New Democratic Party came to power, replacing the left-leaning Syriza, which had won elections first in 2015 in the wake of the severe economic and financial crisis that Greece had then faced.
When the global financial crisis hit the world in 2008 and later it impacted on Europe, Greece was among the most affected. Its budget deficit reached 15% of the GDP. Unemployment reached a level of almost 30%. Debt was about $300 billion. And in 3 installments, IMF gave a bailout amounting to more than $350 billion. At that time, relations between Greece and its European partners reached almost a level of crisis, with differences related to budgets, wages, inflation. And there was talk of whether there would be a Brexit even before a Brexit happened. With Russia, Greece has traditionally had a strong partnership, also based on their shared faith in Orthodox Christianity. But with potential EU and NATO expansion to the east, there have been some differences. As China is making its strategic thrust through the Belt and Road Initiative, the Greek port of Piraeus has come under partial long-term lease and Chinese management, raising issues related to sovereignty. Greece also has differences with Turkey over Cyprus and the Aegean Sea. So to go through all this in detail and understand the ramifications, we have with us Ambassador Panos Kalogeropoulos, the Greek ambassador to India. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
To begin with, I wanted to focus a bit on the bilateral relations between India and Greece. For people in Greece, when they look at India, they look at it in the historical context or in terms of the modern phase of the relationship. How do you describe that?
I would say that they look at it in both through the prism of history, but also through very much modern India, the modern world. I myself remember when I was a young boy, my parents took me to see a film, to watch the film Mother India. Mm-hmm. And I still remember one scene from this movie where this woman in the village, I think it was played by Nagish, objects to marry that rich landowner, and the children are hungry, and she cooks something, and they say, "Mother, when it will be finally ready, the food?" And the little boy takes off the lid and sees that it's only water boiling in the vessel. That is something that has marked me since I must have been 6 years old. But India, in the popular imagination, is also a vast continent of traditions, of colors, of different views on the world, of a certain idea of spirituality. But there is also modern India that my compatriots have come over the years to realize, a thriving economy, already I think the 5th in the world. Indians are everywhere, and they are behind, all the IT developments, and they are admired for that in the world.
Alexander of Macedon, also known as Alexander the Great, came all the way from Greece through the Mediterranean, through the Persian Empire, and to the western parts of India. And his encounters with King Porus as part of Indian history and folklore. So is there some consciousness in Greece related to that interaction in 4th century BC?
Very much so, very much so. For us, Alexander the Great is, of course, a paradigm figure of what greatness can do, and this very typical for the Greek mind, quest to always to know, to go out, to travel, to learn, to get informed on other people, on other ways, on different approaches. As Homer says in the Odyssey about Ulysses, he was much interested in getting to know other people's minds. So for us, Alexander was, a conqueror for sure in the traditional sense of the word, but also a big explorer, because he was accompanied by all these people, all these scientists, all these philosophers. But he himself, as the annals tell us, had these meetings with the local, here in India, local wise men, and he was always inquisitive about their philosophy, about what do they believe and why do they believe in it. But King Porus is also, for our popular perception, a valiant opponent and worth receiving the royal treatment that Alexander accorded him.
A large number of films, I find, Indian films, are made in Greece. Now, of course, Greece has a lot of beauty, a lot of wonderful tourism sites. Are they attracted just by that, or are there some special benefits, tax benefits and subsidies that you give to Indian filmmakers?
We have a legislation, updated legislation passed a couple of years ago, that allows, under certain conditions, the size of the production, the number of people, also including local people employed, to get tax benefits once a film of certain requirements and prescriptions has been shot in Greece. I'm very pleased that you mentioned that. We would very much like to have more of these films shot in Greece.
I understand almost 18% of the GDP in Greece is generated through tourism, which is very significant for a country which is a part of Europe. What have you done to sustain the interest in tourism, and what is the kind of impact that you find tourism sector has in Greece in terms of employment, in terms of wealth creation?
Well, you said it yourself, 18% means that hundreds of thousands of Greeks work in the tourism business, in the tourism industry. What have we done? God and nature provided, of course, for an incomparable beauty of our landscape, of our scenery, of our beaches. The waters in Greece have no rival. And then plus all this cultural heritage, antiquity, Middle Ages, modern Greece. So, and the natural friendliness of the Greek people. Very often what you hear from Indian visitors, what were your impressions? Yes, impressive monuments, great scenery, beautiful country, but the warmth of the people, that comes as a standard comment, the warmth of the people. And that allows me to go back to our perception India and the Indian people, we share the same approach to life, the importance of family bonds, the importance of getting to know the other person, and the warmth, a certain look at life.
I wanted to talk a little about your relationship with your partners in Europe today. After Greece became independent from the Ottoman Empire in 1830, for a while it was a Bavarian king who ruled over Greece, and there was a sense of some discrimination against the local Greek people. Germany had occupied Greece during the Second World War. When Greece faced the economic crisis after 2008, there was tension in the relations between Greece and Germany because it was the German economic approach and philosophy which was seen as dominating Europe, austerity rather than being welfare oriented. So has Greece come out of that situation? Is Brexit completely behind us? Is Greece questioning still the value of the euro? And with the rise of right-wing forces in Europe and people questioning the relevance of European consolidation, centralized decision-making, how do you see today the mood in Greece related to the European project?
Well, let me briefly say that when the financial crisis knocked on our door in late 2009, we had, of course, because we share a common currency with our partners in the Eurozone, we had to address ourselves, the natural thing to do, to address ourselves to our Eurozone partners and the European Central Bank. The IMF, I wanted to come to that point that you mentioned at your opening remarks, came because Europe and some countries in Europe wanted it to come because the IMF had the know-how to face situations like that of the euro crisis. We were the first to be hit by this crisis and the longest suffering, but there were other countries in the Eurozone, Ireland, Portugal, Cyprus, that also suffered and had to undergo through these financial adjustment programs. When this crisis hit, so we addressed ourselves to our partners. And as you rightly pointed out, there were here two approaches that differed from one. One was that mainly represented by the country you have mentioned and some others in the north that believed in the absolute, unquestionable supremacy of financial orthodoxy, that you have to impose austerity, cut all the state funding in order to have your finances in order. And there were those, Greece among them in the first line, but not alone, who said that you have to take things more carefully. You have to approach this crisis with from a broader perspective, because social and political consequences would follow. We do not live in 2009-10 in order to impose so much suffering on our connationals because of the financial orthodoxy alone. There are ways to get to that target of reducing the excessive deficit of budget deficit and the huge public debt, but we have to go with these considerations in mind. Unfortunately, this line did not prevail, and therefore we found ourselves in the first line of the victims of this. People with a moderate income found themselves jobless from one day to the other. They would depend on soup kitchens provided by the church or by other organizations in order to survive. People would cut the heating, turn off the heating in very cold winters in the north of Greece. So there was a lot of suffering. Measures were taken, and we finally came out of the bailout program in August 2018. We have learned our lessons, and we want to move ahead with a better approach to our finances.
Historically, in Europe, new countries have been created, borders have changed, also as empires have disintegrated. Recently, an issue arose when the former Yugoslavia broke up. And of course, it's been said that a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. But on the subject of naming of one of your neighbors, there was, or new neighbors after disintegration of Yugoslavia, there was a major international and diplomatic controversy. So can you tell us about why this controversy arose just about naming a country and why it persisted for such a long time?
Well, as you rightly said, what is in a name? In a name, in this case, there are several things. You are referring to the country previously known as former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
A fairly long and complex
very
name
long
for a country.
And complex name, an interim name, until Greece and this country reach a solution. This is not something purely bilateral. This was considered an issue affecting international stability.
But why was disagreement on the name?
Well, let me tell you, because it was an issue not about the name. Under the name, there were claims by our northern neighbor to monopolize the cultural heritage of ancient Macedonia, a kingdom. You mentioned Alexander and his father Philip II, whose tomb has been discovered in Greece some years ago, a kingdom that formed part of the Greek world. These people, the inhabitants, some forces of this country, political forces, they considered that they had the exclusive right to the use of that name, and therefore to everything that came with the name, including territories that belong to their neighbors, not only Greece, but also other countries to our northeast and northwest. So there was a real irredentist threat to us. Not that we were afraid, we are so much bigger and more powerful than and prosperous than our neighbor, but it was an insistence on monopolizing this heritage and whatever comes with it.
And now you've resolved that by agreeing to call it North Macedonia.
After arduous negotiations, we managed to reach an agreement in June 2018, the so-called Prespa agreement from a lake that we share, both countries, whereby they, our neighbors, came to, also through an internal process, they changed their constitution, they adopted the name Republic of North Macedonia, therefore giving a geographic component to the name Macedonia. They do not control it, they do not own it anymore.
Relations between Greece and China seem to have really strengthened of late. I refer to the port of Piraeus near Athens. China is seen to have been supportive of Greece through investments and other action when Greece was going through the economic challenges. Greece has recently joined the 16+1 process that China has with 16 countries of Central and Eastern Europe, and now it has become 17+1. Many see it as part of China's attempt to split the European Union in a way, which is 28 countries so far. So, and at the same time, many in Europe describe China as a systemic rival, and that the way China is authoritarian system, the state enterprises in China competing with private enterprises in Europe, not quite on the same footing. How is Greece looking at China and its sort of enhanced effort and engagement in Europe?
Look, China is a permanent member of the Security Council, a great power in its own right, and economically speaking, the powerhouse of much of world growth and development. You referred, and I referred at the beginning of our conversation, to the deep respect that our two peoples and our intellectual and scientific communities have for each other, Greece and India. The same roughly applies to China. The Chinese have a great respect for the Greek cultural heritage. They visit us in huge numbers. And in 2008, the port of Piraeus was opened. There was a bid to privatize part of it. In other words, to give it a long-term lease of some of its infrastructure. An important port in the Mediterranean anyway. So the Chinese company COSCO was the only one that presented themselves, and they got the bid. They want to use, and they are using this, as a gate for Chinese merchandise towards Central and Eastern Europe, because it cuts the transportation costs and time considerably. So Piraeus has become, has grown up enormously, exponentially, and it has become really a rival port to much of the other Mediterranean ports. So, however, having said that, let's not forget that Chinese investment in Greece is about 1% of the total Chinese investment in the European Union countries.
So last subject that I wanted to discuss with you was related to a historical challenge that you have with Turkey. I mean, at one stage, Greece was under the Ottoman Empire. Today, you have differences over the agency, Cyprus. At the same time, Greece is among the few in the European Union supporting Turkey's accession to EU. How do you see the relationship with Turkey now?
You know, you as an Indian citizen, as an Indian diplomat, you know very well that we cannot choose our neighbors. Neighbors are there because destiny, history have decided so. We have to live with our neighbors. Greece wants to have good relations with Turkey. Irrespective of past differences, problems, tragedies, pressures, we want to have good relations with Turkey. And as you said, we are nowadays perhaps the only member state of the European Union that still actively supports the European perspective of Turkey. We believe that a European Turkey, so to say, a member of the European Union, would fully accept the European set of rules for behavior, international behavior, among which respect for good neighborly relations plays a major role.
Ambassador Kalogeropoulos, I wanted to thank you for joining us at the show. And it is fascinating that Greece many see as an idyllic country with large number of tourists going there, beautiful sights, and at the same time you find yourself in the cross currents of so many global challenges, be it the international crisis that you dealt with, be it issues related to European Union's expansion, consolidation, challenges emerging from the rise of China, challenges emerging from Russia's concerns related to expansion of EU and NATO to the east. But of course, the positive thing for India and Greece is their shared faith and support for multilateralism and the strength in the bilateral relationship.
And allow me just a last point back on the bilateral track, that our relations have grown up a lot over the last years with several visits. We are grateful that the new Indian president, Ramnath Kovind, chose Greece as his first European destination in 2018, and he paid a highly successful state visit in Greece in June 2018. And this year, India is the partner country in the Thessaloniki International Fair in the north of Greece, and we are expecting our Indian friends with open arms.
I'm sure, and there'll be many more Indians visiting Greece and perhaps many more Indian films being made in Greece.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.